Hailing from the Jersey Shore and raised as athletes, the Airey Bros have always shared a passion for physical culture, athletic performance, and human optimization, always striving to be the strongest versions of themselves, mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Along the way, they've met some pretty amazing humans and have had some pretty epic adventures. The intention of Airey Bros Radio is to showcase these amazing people and the impact that they've had on them, and to share tips, tricks, and hacks so that you can win each day, every day.
You're listening to Airey Bros Radio. Be there or be square, because it's all killer, no filler.
Go 10 minutes outside your door if you're going to school in Orem, and go hiking, go fishing. Clarity of purpose, which is our why. Dealing with our attitude and laying out, the things we need to do to reach our goals, what kinds of things technically, what kinds of things. The ownership, the first thing that we talked about was 90% of the success that they have is on them. I said, so if something's going wrong, who do you look to first? Our goals, we have 33 wrestlers. We want them all to reach their goals. And I'll give them a 3x5 card after a tournament, and we'll say, here's 2 to 3 things that we want you to work on them the first day back. That's all they do for a half hour, is just work on those things, and then we'll get into practice. When they won their quarterfinal match, it's one thing to say, hey, it's one more match. But it's another for them to earn an All-American status and still treat it just like every other match, which is exactly what Taylor and Demetrius did. When you evaluate it, where does that come from? I mean, it's up to me to make sure that my coaches are all on the same page. You can't do the same things with one team that you could do with another team, because the personalities are different. Your leadership is different. So how you do those things, you have to adjust, and you have to be ready to adapt. This is Greg Williams, and you're listening to Airey Bros Radio. The mountains, the fact that they have so much hunting, fishing. I mean, you can find just about everything here. So it's there's not a lot that they can come here and say, oh, we want this or this or this, that we can't find anymore.
So there's plenty of outdoor stuff for people to do if you're really into outdoors. Is there a lot of stuff, city-wise or in the town for them to get in trouble with, or is it pretty much like a smaller town and has a lot of good outdoors to get involved
Orem's, I mean, it's not a small town like if you think Utah, it's bigger than Provo, really. Provo is a well-known city. Orem's not as well-known, but, we're only, 30 minutes from Salt Lake, and we're about 50 minutes from Park City, which is, again, quaint and small, but it's got plenty to do there as well. So, I mean, you can go 10 minutes outside your door if you're going to school in Orem, and go hiking, go fishing. There's plenty of hunting around. One of our wrestlers who came from Mesquite, Ty Smith, he huge hunter. Like when we were recruiting him, they were showing us pictures, and I'm like, oh, he's going to love it here. But anyway, so there's plenty to do. If they want to go have fun, they can go down to Salt Lake, go to Park City. There's things in Orem and Provo as well, but it's not really big city here.
How's the season been going? We caught you up in Greeley with one of the season openers at Northern Colorado. How's everything been going?
Well, the bad news is we've lost one of our All-Americans for the year, and that's Demetrius. So he got hurt in his match against Bakersfield when we were dueling them in Cal Baptist, and it was a complete tear, ACL. So he just got surgery on Tuesday. He'll be out all year. He will get a year back, and it will probably play into a really good team, because we have 3 guys that aren't freshmen and sophomores on this team. So we have 1 senior, 2 juniors, and the rest are sophomores and below. And the progression has been going really well. Last year and this year, we've seen some great strides with our guys. And so we've got a bunch of guys that are ready to break through. A couple of them broke through at Vegas. Got a couple more that haven't broke through yet, but are right there. And then we've got a couple of guys that were redshirting that could be ranked right now if we had them out of their red shirt. So I'm pretty excited about the direction we're going. I think it's going to be best team we've had in the next couple of years. So
Right on. And I think one of those athletes you were speaking of just got back from under 23 Worlds, right, in Greco?
Yeah, Taylor Lamont.
Yeah.
And Taylor's taken some time off. We actually made him do that. he was pretty run down. Like he never stopped. So we got done, with nationals, and then 3 weeks later we're wrestling, Olympic trials, and then he does the U23s, makes that team, starts. He's, one of the things that hurt him a couple of years ago is he was trying to do both. He was trying to, get ready for Greco and do collegiate. So we backed off the collegiate, but he still was doing like 2 days of drills just to kind of, keep his timing down. But cutting down to 121 for Worlds and then coming back was a little bit different than a year ago. When he was making that weight for trials, we didn't have a season right then because it was spring. So just coming back, he was pretty run down. Timing was off, so he was frustrated by that, and you just said it's going to come, and we're not going to rush you back. We wrestled him 2 duels earlier, and I didn't think he looked that good. He didn't feel as good as what he normally would, but I mean, he's able to win because he's a pretty good wrestler. But he wanted to go to Vegas, and I talked to him 2 nights before, just asking him some questions and just watching him in the practice room. And he said he still wanted to go. And then I talked to the other coaches. We watched him in practice, and we all agreed he's not ready. So, and when we approached him that time, he said, yeah, I get it, So he'll probably be out the rest of just this half, and then we'll get him going for our January, February duels and get ready for postseason. But he'll be ready. I mean, it's just, you work hard, you get to a certain level, and don't want to go out there and, not be able to compete the way that you're capable of. And, there was some burnout there, and he's never had that in his life. So, but yeah, we're excited about what he'll be able to do. And this will be his last year at 25. Next year, you get back on the ranking thing for the Olympics. So he'll go to 32, for that. So 133 next year. But we got a really good redshirt 125 right now. So.
Okay. Yeah, I worked with a coach who once his famous line was, "There's no such thing as overtraining; it's just under recovered." And I think one good thing we're seeing a lot of in the fitness and health industry is the focus now, emphasis on recovery. So I think it's coming to the forefront. And there's so many different tools and utilities that athletes have at their fingertips now to help with their recovery. And I was going to ask too if he was going to come back at 25. So it looks like he'll be in the lineup at 25 come January.
Yes. Yeah. So like I said, we're redshirting Case Mager, who's 125 pounder. He's been doing really well. And we have a Yusuf Lilly, who we signed, last year. He was second in Fargo this year in freestyle. So he's getting to wrestle a lot of matches, and then we'll redshirt him next year when we pull Case out. And same thing at 33. We've got Hayden Drury, who's now ranked 16th or something like that. Had a good tournament in Vegas, and so next year we'll redshirt him, move Taylor up, and then Taylor will graduate, and then Hayden will be back in. So
speaking of having a younger team and only 3 upperclassmen on that team, how do you as a coach get the younger guys to focus on now and not worrying about next year? Because I know on some younger teams there's a lot of, I can't wait to next year, 2 years from now we're going to be really good. How do you get them to focus on now and making the most out of now so they can get to those years coming down the line?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's something that we used to run into a lot. We've packaged everything. We just did it a year ago going into last year. We ended up we've got 4 words up on our wall, and then we have a theme. And so within those 4 words and within that theme, everything that we deal with is addressed. Like anything that they run across, rather than it being, I've got this next year, or hey, it was somebody else's fault, or whatever. I mean, we're dealing with clarity of purpose, which is our why, dealing with our attitude and laying out, the things we need to do to reach our goals, what kinds of things technically, what kinds of things, strength-wise, conditioning, sleep, diet, all the things that go into performance. They lay that out, have their journals. We talk about this all the time now. And then as they're clear on that, and if they're consistent with that, then their grit, will kind of take place. Like when they go out and they have tough situations, they'll be able to overcome those because everything's clear to them. They're consistent with what they're doing. They know that they deserve it. And then the last one is ownership. So with ownership, the first thing that we talked about was 90% of the success that they have is on them. And that 10% is their support. So that's coaches, family, friends. I said, so if something's going wrong, who do you look to first? You know, and then, you know, because that's something we deal with a lot these days. People want to blame. They want to, you know, it's not my fault. And so having them do that, now we go into also with the ownership is accountability. So you're taking accountability, you're reevaluating, but then the 10%, there's communication that needs to take place. Like they need to say, I'm frustrated with this, or I'm having problems with this, and not think that we're always reading their minds. So let's go to your question where you say, you know, how do we get them to think about now? Well, what do you want to accomplish now? Where do you want to progress right now? And then you're evaluating that. And it might be, I've got to get off the bottom. And so technically they're working on a couple things, and the coaches have given them some specific things, and they're working with a coach or they're working with somebody in the room while they're going live. And then they're evaluating that, and they're adjusting what they're writing in their journal. Like, hey, I've got to get 25 reps of this, you know, after practice if I'm not getting in during practice. And if it's not working, if they're getting frustrated, they need to communicate. Say, hey, I know you've showed us this. I know that, you know, you've worked with this, you know, I know what it's supposed to look like, but it's not working when I'm going live. So we can go over film, you know, whether it's matches, or we can talk about, you know, why it's not working and help them along with those things. But the whole thing about this, like you had mentioned that you wanted to talk about our goals. Well, our goals, we have 33 wrestlers. We want them all to reach their goals. And in order to do that, you know, there needs to be that open communication. We've let them know that we're 100% committed to the 10% that they need from us. You know, we'll lay out the practice schedule for them. We'll lay out all of these, you know, like the words and what they're supposed to do, and help them outline that. But then they've got to take some initiative and say, here's some areas. Like we hired a nutritionist this year because last year I was working with 8 different people who were sending me their diets every day. And we're talking about, okay, there's, you know, you're not getting enough water in, or that's too long between meals, or you don't have enough protein, or you're not getting complex carbs, or, you know, whatever those things. And I don't really have time to do that on top of everything else. Well, I've got guys on the team that aren't using her, and I have guys who are using her like almost daily. And so again, when we talk about accountability, when we get to spring after nationals, we'll have an interview with everybody. The questions will be, where do you think you're doing well with your process? You know, what are those things? What do you feel like you need to put more effort in for your process to get better for next year? You know, where are the coaches? How have they been able to help you with your process? Where are you going? You know, where can they help you more next year? Your teammates, same thing. So we had 34 interviews last year, and not one person's complaining about this didn't happen because, or, you know, any blaming. We were just really focused on them, what they were doing well, what they could do better, how we could help them. It's just a whole different culture now once we did that, and it's been great. And so the guys who are redshirting, it's the same. Like when we were doing some sprints today, and, you know, I'm whispering to Case, who's a redshirt. I'm just like, go get this one, you know, just like they're the starter. Like all 33 guys are treated exactly the same. They can meet with any coach anytime they want to meet. I mean, we're available for them, you know. So that's really kind of when you talk about a red shirt or somebody who's not a starter at that time. Okay, if you're not a starter, what do you need to do to be the starter? You know, if you're redshirting, okay, what do you want to accomplish this year to be ready? You know, and we tell them the red shirt's what we want to do, but it's not 100% guaranteed. So they need to be ready all the time. And of course they are competing. So they are getting ready, and we are able to watch film with them, and we are able to go back and have them write in their journal things that they want to adjust. And I'll give them a 3x5 card after a tournament, and we'll say, here's 2 to 3 things that we want you to work on them the first day back. That's all they do for a half hour is just work on those things, and then we'll get into practice. So just a lot of communication, package those words, and then our theme is next point, which ties in next opportunity to succeed, whether it's classroom, personal life, or on the mat. So
talking about that package or that system, what got you to that point to create that? Did you have help with that? Did you read it in a book or something? Or was that all your years of coaching, figuring out your own system for success?
It's the last. I mean, I'm a little frustrated with myself that I didn't do it before, but really what motivated was when Tate Orndorff transferred. I knew it was a mistake. I knew the things that led into it, found out some things, and just felt like, okay, we have a situation where we kind of did some group coaching. So I had my 3 assistants each had like 11 kids. And when he left, there was some triangulation that was going on. And that coach is gone. But what I had to find out is where are our gaps between what I'm expecting from my coaches, communication with the wrestlers, and so forth. And I mean, we've had a good thing going. I mean, our wrestlers, everybody felt like was a family, still do. It's been a big deal. We make that a point. We build on that. What we do with activities, how I put them in groups of 3, 4, or 5 if we're doing games, early in the fall, so that they're not just going with their friends. They're learning to try to win with a different group of guys, and you just bond. We do that intentionally. So when Tate came and told me that he wanted to transfer, I went and spoke to some of my leaders, guys. Like, I had coached Taylor since he was 5 years old. So he's somebody that will be pretty straightforward with me. Said, hey, where do you feel like we have gaps with the coaches? A couple of my seniors that year, it was a strong group, talked to them. And then I realized that I needed to do a better job. Like, I don't blame the coach that was making that mistake. I mean, it falls on my shoulders. So like, just like I expect my wrestlers, when you evaluate it, where does that come from? I mean, it's up to me to make sure that my coaches are all on the same page. It's up to me to make sure that my leaders are on the same page, and that what they're doing with the wrestlers is the same communication that would come straight from me to them. And that, when they don't know that, they know that they should be coming to me and say, hey, how do we handle this situation? And I needed to make sure that my coaches knew if there was anything at all that wasn't going right, that they needed to bring it to my desk. If it didn't come across my desk, then how did I know? And I didn't know a couple things that were going on with Tate until it was too late. So so basically what I did at that point was I had to plan this. I had to train my coaches. I had to make sure they knew that this had to happen or they wouldn't be able to stay on staff. I needed to make sure that what we presented to the wrestlers, we were a solid front, that they knew how to handle it if somebody was having a problem. And they bought into it 100%. I have a great coaching staff and always have. And like I said, even the coach that was making that mistake, I think there was a lack of understanding of what was happening with that until it was too late. And it was, again, I should have been training him better. And we got rid of group coaching. That's the other thing, is I now run every practice. So none of the wrestlers have any question about who's running the program. Before, I was designing the practices, but the guys who were doing the groups, they would take turns running the practice, and I just basically floated, helped whoever. And I just went back to the basics. I'm a good basics coach. I make sure that they get that stuff down, and you don't just jump from here to here to here and then come back to it again in a month. When you teach something, you make sure that you keep teaching it every day until it's part of their system. And you can build on that and add to that, but your drill time gets longer. And your live time is still fine, but you just make sure that you're getting those in and you're doing it multiple times a week and not just here and there. And that was what we noticed last year. Was we had a couple of years where we felt like our freshmen had not progressed as much as we would have liked. And even though we feel like in the past we've always done a good job developing, it felt like that had gone down a little bit. And so that was another thing that we made sure. When I design things now, I send them out to the coaches. And then if they have any questions, hey, maybe we should try this, or what about this? They know they have the freedom to add, and so I think last year maybe there were about 5 times where one of the coaches might have said, hey, with it being this time of week or with this coming up, what do you think about doing this? And I think maybe 3 times I was able to explain why we were doing what we were doing, so we kept it the same. And I think 2 other times we ended up adjusting because it was a really good, suggestion. So we still work together as a staff as to what's going into the practices. But there's no question to the guys. I mean, I'm an old guy. I don't wrestle anymore. So they're like, what does he know? So anyway. But yeah, basically the package came just from I've known all this stuff for years. I mean, goals were huge. When I started coaching high school, when I got into my club, all of my kids had to write their goals out and then steps to reach those goals. I mean, that's been a staple all along. But to have a process, to focus on the process. I don't know if you guys remember, but about 5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, at the NCAA championships, right before the finals, they did a video up on the Megatron, and it was interviewing guys like Dake and Taylor and Burrows and all these guys about, what's it like getting ready to wrestle the big match in the finals. And almost to a T, they said, well, it's one more match. And you look at what Penn State does, in the semis and finals every year at nationals, they've got that down. They don't treat it as something different, and they're able to perform at the highest level because they don't let these mental blocks get in the way, because it's so important to them. And it's important to get on that podium. It's important to get a national championship. And we pushed that. And I was so proud of our two guys in the semis, because when they won their quarterfinal match, it's one thing to say, hey, it's one more match. But it's another for them to earn an All-American status and still treat it just like every other match, which is exactly what Taylor and Demetrius did. They pointed to their families, sharing it with them, and then walked off and got ready, did their cool down, did their interviews talking about they weren't done yet because they were planning on trying to win a national championship. And so those are the things that we want. We want the guys to buy into the process, focus on that daily, keep improving that daily, and then let's see where you end up. But take every match the same way. Just every match, get your best performance, be the best version of yourself.
You mentioned the pen to paper process, both with the high school kids are writing down their goals, and you've mentioned the journals a couple times. So we're big journal guys here. Is that something that, the guys know what they need to do and that they're on their own to do that? And you check in with them? Or is that part of the process of practice, depending on the time of the week or season, where you check back in with those sort of goals and objectives and where things are lining up for them?
And that's a great question. I actually was just we were down to the Vegas tournament and worked out at Gold Rush with Chase, Pammy's club. And we were talking about what he did, because he's working with youth. And he actually, with every group that he does, takes a period of time where they write in their journal, and it's quiet time and they write. I haven't done that. I thought it was a great idea. But what I do is I will do an evaluation or an interview with them 3 times a year. And so when we go over that and we start talking about, what are you doing with this? Or, when we start talking about what they're doing well with their process or what they want to do better, we'll address that, and we'll address things that maybe they need to start adding, like the nutrition. Maybe you need to start keeping better track of that. But even more common would be the wrestlers know that they can set up an appointment just to come see me if anything's up. I mean, mental health is huge these days. And so it might be somebody passed away in their family that affected them a lot, which just happened to us. And the young man was able to share that with me. And sometimes we need to give them room. Like, you need to leave practice. You need to not be here right now. Just take care of this right now. But when I'll talk to them, a lot of times I'll say, are you writing this in your journal? Like, it'll come up like a certain situation. I'll say, maybe, and they might say, no, I'm not. And every once in a while, I don't give them the journal. I don't tell them they have to do the journal. I just tell them that they should be having a journal in their locker, and they should probably have a journal by their bed. And those are the 2 that I suggest, because one of the things say, a lot of times you're carrying this around in your head. You have trouble sleeping, or you're hanging on to it. You have that anxiety. But when you write it down before bed, you've put it somewhere, and it doesn't have to sit there in your head, right? So I have some guys that are adverse to it for whatever reason, just like I have some guys who are adverse to watching film. Like they feel like they start watching film and it gets them all revved up, and they're too worried about what the other guy's doing. And I was like, So I addressed that this year. I just said, everybody needs to watch film. You need to watch film just where you can see the things you're doing, like what we're talking about. And then it's always good to know what they have, even though we may not have to adjust very much, but there may be something we're adjusting, like just how we move, like what his lead leg is. I had one of my guys who's been ranked. He went to nationals last year and he lost a match at Vegas because he didn't circle with 7 seconds left and no stall calls. And, he's up by 2 and he gets taken down. They go overtime. And that's a guy who's experienced. But, those are kinds of things I would write that in my journal, as like, hey, when I'm wrestling in practice, I'm going to put myself in those 30-second situations, which we do in practice. We'll put them in a 1 minute or, a 30-second situation where they're up by a certain amount of points or down by a certain amount of points. But we leave it up to them. We're not micromanaging them with it. But if I feel like they're not writing it down and they need to, I'll say, I want you to get a journal by tomorrow. And I've done that a couple times this year. So.
Well, that's a beautiful thing. We're big journal guys, and it wasn't something, at least, that I utilized as an athlete, as a young athlete. I do now as I still compete. But what you said there about getting it out of your head before you go to bed, that resonates so much, because I've said that to so many people. Is you almost have like this light bulb moment where, like, man, I should have been writing that down instead of continually verbally like ear beating someone with the same thing over and over. It's like, just get it out of your head first and then analyze it and then maybe take it to someone else. But like, yeah, so that really resonates. I appreciate that. With your practices and filming specifically, you said you had some guys that might not be super into it as some of the other guys on the team. Is it a situation like how a football team does it, where they're watching film together as a program, or is it on their own or with individual coaches?
With a coach.
Yeah,
with a coach. And sometimes it's just, hey, here's who we're wrestling. Just want you to see it. I mean, obviously, if you have a big duel coming up and you've got certain matchups, you're going to want to, be able to be aware of whatever their tendencies are. But I do have one of my coaches, and he's a really good coach, but he'll work with them on that anxiety, I guess. Like, he'll say, hey, he really doesn't like to watch it much, but he'll do a good job of just saying, here's what I want you to do, to make sure. And his communication with the wrestlers are really good. So I don't mind that, but I just told him, get used to doing it. I think a lot of times, like when I did club, that's where I got really big on it, is because part of running a club where I'm working with 80 kids and they're all across, up Cache Valley, Salt Lake, Utah County. Basically what I do is I had to have the season was spring through summer, and then I do some fall mat wrestling stuff because we didn't do a lot of folk style. I mean, now you do a lot more than when I was doing it 15 years ago. Yeah, there was a national tournament and we would do some stuff for that, but I wouldn't get enough time. We'd be doing more parterre. So in the fall, I'd let them wrestle on their feet for a half hour, and then we would teach for an hour on the mat. And then I would go out to their schools, and there'd be maybe 3 at one school or 5 at a school or whatever. And I would work with them on some specific things. But one thing I guaranteed them as being part of the club is if there was somebody they had to beat at state, I would watch that film with them. And I can't tell you how many times we beat guys that beat us earlier just because we were able to go over those and then make some adjustments. Whereas the other guy won and he thought he was fine, and that's one of the things I'd tell my guys who were winning. I said, that guy's going to make an adjustment. So let's watch the match. And now I'll show you what he's going to probably adjust so that you're prepared for that, so that we're one step ahead. So I think film is great to be able, like if I'm telling a guy, he's reaching with both hands, or that he needs to get lower in his stance, or he needs to change levels, or he needs to not, telegraph his shot but by how he's backstepping. They can hear that, and I can walk them through it, but them seeing it is very helpful. So a lot of times they can just focus on themselves and be able to make some adjustments because now I see what I'm doing. And I didn't realize I was doing that. So, I mean, there's a lot of ways to use it, and we just use it differently based on what we feel like, based on what we know about that young man. For this guy, let's focus on him. For this, there's a couple things that we just need to be aware of. But again, we want them to go out and establish themselves. We don't want them to go out and just get defensive and try to stop whatever that guy's doing. We want to be able to be the one who's initiating. So again, it's an like everything we do is individual, how we use it.
So on the flip side of that, do you have any guys that are over analytical? They have to kind of pull them away from the screen.
Yeah, those are the types of guys that we have to adjust a little bit, and why we might have a coach say, we're just going to go over what we want you to do and just get on the mat and do it. We do that for nationals a lot. It's just like, here's what we're going to do. This is what you're going to see. And we basically have 3 guys that we're preparing for, which is the guy we're wrestling first. And if we win, who we think, and if we lose, who we think that might be. So, but mostly we're focusing on that first one, and they'll be aware of the other ones. And then as soon as the matches are over, then we'll go back and we'll either peek at some film with them, or we'll just go over again. Here's what you need to be aware of. So that they're prepared. So
Coach, you had mentioned you had the club before you were at Utah Valley, and you were a high school coach, and it seems like that you're constantly evolving and constantly changing your system to better the program. What was that transition going from a club coach to high school going to D1? And did you expect that you were going to be constantly learning and evolving in this process?
Again, when you sent me these questions ahead of time, I saw that, I said, wow, these are some in-depth questions, ones I don't get asked very often. But, I should have probably stayed involved with college wrestling when I got done with college, because that's really the best way to work yourself into as a college coach. So there was definitely a learning curve coming back into a college room. But so the way it worked was I actually was asked to help coach a club while I was a sophomore in college. They had just watched me wrestle and they thought I was fun to watch, and they thought, so they approached my coach to see if it would be okay. And he said, as long as it didn't conflict with, anything we were doing. So I was coaching that for a couple of years, and I changed my major because of it. I decided I wanted to be a coach and a teacher. So I did that, and it just so happened that the job where most of those kids were from, that job opened up, and I interviewed along with 18 other people, and I was able to get the job mostly because most of the parents liked me, and they kind of were, vocal about wanting to get me out there. So for those 7 years, I ran that almost like a college program. I worked those guys out really hard and got them to buy in, and it was a great 7 years. And then I just, I realized that if I wanted to start a family and stuff, the teaching wasn't really high paying. And my best friend in college was an ER doc, and he was getting together with a couple of other people, and they were starting a rehab, and they wanted me to run the rehab. And I was marketing education. So I had business background. I had been a personal trainer when I was a grad assistant, so, I had a lot of background. I just had to learn the specifics of PT, just putting these people through that. And so I started a club, and at first it was just to help out around in Salt Lake because I'd moved down to Salt Lake. And then I started having parents asking me to coach their kids, like extra time. So I started the club. So I started elite wrestling and went from 10 to 20 to 40 to, and then I couldn't go more than 80. It was just because I had some people who helped me, but I ran everything, and it was already into 2 locations. So the transition from high school to club was nothing. I was already coaching. I was doing year-round wrestling, so that was nothing. But I also started officiating, because in order to stay on top of the D1, techniques and things that were going, I needed to still be out there and not just be in a high school, or club setting. And so I just continued just to learn and keep, wrestling's progressive, and it might cycle back to certain things, that go away for a while. But basically it's a continual process. And you can't rest on your laurels, and you can't do the same things with one team that you could do with another team, because the personalities are different. Your leadership is different. So how you do those things, you have to adjust, and you have to be ready to adapt. So when I went from the club to the college, there were a couple people that I had helping coach and that were in the room, that had been in the room. So I wanted to see what they were teaching, how they were teaching. And I knew the basics would still be there. They still were needed because I was coaching kids to get them to the college level. So my first All-American, Ben Kerr, was actually, I coached him from 6th grade on. So he was one of my club kids, and a lot of our guys that we had early were my club kids. So I mean, there wasn't any question about knowing how to coach, but I wanted to take in what I feel like somebody who was in a college room from all the way through till, when I was in the room with them, I wanted to see what they had to offer. And so I would sit back and say, I want you to go ahead and run this and run that. And I'm just kind of taking notes in my mind. And so just from there, and then just getting involved with competitions, I knew what I needed to spend more time on, and just kept learning. And the thing is, I'm a much better coach now than I was 15 years ago. And if I get to the point where I feel like I'm okay, I know it all, then it's time to retire. So it's just last year and this year have been my funnest by far. And it's because we packaged everything. That's the right process. We're able to have fun. The guys know right where to go to if something's not going right. It's just, I should have done a long time ago, and I was kicking myself in the butt, but at least we finally did it. And it's not like the guys didn't have a good experience before. Like I said before, everybody who's come through, they know that UVU wrestling is a family, and that once you're on it, even the guys who've transferred, like even Tate, we're at Vegas, he comes up, gives me a big hug. I mean, I love him. I love his older brother, graduated, and we've had a couple guys who transferred over the years, not very many. We actually hung on to most all of our guys, but that's why it was so hard, because we've got this All-American kid and he's leaving. And, we're trying to build a program where we can get to be top 10 and then climb from there. And in order to do that, can't really afford to lose that kind of talent. So.
Well, Coach, you're talking our language, evolving, becoming a better coach as you go. That is what we're about. And you had mentioned Ben as being your first All-American. And correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that he had taken some time off and went on a mission, and then came back and finished up his eligibility. Is that something that you deal with a lot being in Utah, and how do you manage that?
Okay. Yeah. Ben was really old when he graduated, because he took a year and kind of gray shirted at Oklahoma. Okay. So he was going to like a junior college and just kind of working out with their like RTC club team. And then he had Cruzon's disease, which was his structure, his bones and everything. They didn't grow. They didn't grow normally. And so like his eyes looked like they were bulged. Like he dealt with this from a kid. Like he's had several operations where they've opened up his head, given him room to grow and so forth. He found a surgeon while he was out in Oklahoma that was able to do this operation on him that really helped him. Like it was a huge difference from that and what they'd been doing to finding out, hey, I can help you with this. And, I mean, I wouldn't say that you'd look at him and not know that he had, some cranial, disorder, but he looked, I saw him like, I was walking by and he was at a function that I was actually being baptized in the church. Like I fought it, but they finally got me. So, anyway, I hadn't seen him for a while, and I was walking by to go into the chapel, and I saw him and I didn't recognize him at first. And then I looked back and I'm like, Ben, he was like, it was amazing. Right. So, he had to go through that. So he was 2 years out already, then went on his mission for 2 years. So he came back 4 years out of high school. And then he had to go through, the moratorium for 3 years. And he got 2 years of eligibility where we could go postseason. So he really it was a long road for him. And he decided he wanted to make a statement for UVU, help build UVU. We had a really good relationship. And so he came and wrestled for us, and he had a lot of schools after him. But the mission is a really common thing, and it's not usually in the middle of the wrestling. And I would not usually suggest that they come and then go and then come back. But when the church changed the age to 18, most of the kids will go straight out on their mission and then come back. It's an interesting thing, because if you're not like super passionate about wrestling and super confident about wrestling and had success in wrestling, it's going to be really hard to go on your mission and then come back and be successful at D1 level. The reason why is you're leaving in the best shape of your life, and you're coming back in the worst shape of your life since you've been an athlete at the highest intensity in the sport than you're going to ever face. And so a lot of those kids don't last. They have a tough time overcoming. And so if I'm worried about that, like I typically, especially out of state, I'll have a parent ask me, what do you think is best? And the answer to that's always, that's between him and Heavenly Father's, right? So I said, but if you want to know kind of what I think the pros and cons are, I'll walk through those. And so one of them is if you go for your redshirt year, and you're not going to get a redshirt when you come back, right? So you're going, and yet you're going to have this really challenging year, getting your timing back, getting your cells, being able to handle oxygen and be able to do what you need to do physically. And so I will tell them, if it's something where, I'm worried about the confidence, or like if you haven't done well in nationals year after year, then it might be good to go for a year. Even if it hurts you for another year, you'll at least know what you're coming back to. You'll know what to expect. And then we can kind of work step by step, day by day, week by week, and kind of just build that back. And then I treat them differently. I don't let them go live until like November. Like they'll go drill, and we'll just increase the intensity of the drill just to protect their bodies, because a lot of guys will get hurt, otherwise. So, but most of them will go straight out because they're guys that we're offering money to. Means they're pretty good. So they'll go straight out and they come back. And again, we kind of hold their hand for a little while, and then we'll see when it's time to start letting them. And we'll go like 5 minutes live. And we'll add a couple minutes a week, just to kind of, whatever it takes to keep them healthy. And just, again, big picture is everything. That's what we talk about, big picture. It's not about what happens today. It's about where are you going to end up, and it is still a short period of time. And that's another thing we sell the guys on is, you think 5 years seems like a long time, but it'll be done before you know it. So,
yeah. And talking about it, not always, you got to come back after not wrestling for 2 years. Do you notice though that the guys that really love it and come back, there's a difference in maturity with those 2 years, not coming straight from high school and going? Like, do you see that with a lot of them?
It's funny because if you were asked me about football or basketball, I would say that I see that, because I do, watch the sports and know this guy was on a mission, and they seem to do great. But it's a fine line with wrestling because it shakes their confidence. I don't care how good you are. It shakes their confidence, and I have to have them in my office almost weekly. You're fine. Just, you're going to have to be persistent, but still be patient, and that persistent patience gets old. You're 4 months in and you feel like you're not progressing. And again, I do that with first year freshmen. I say, wait till you go home at Christmas, go wrestle with your high school buddies. You'll know how much you've improved, because you're getting your butt kicked by veterans, and you don't really think you're improving. And it's the same with the guys coming back on a mission, from a mission. They guys that never second guess themselves will second guess themselves. And so and yes, they're more mature, but this thing really kind of throws them for a loop. Some of the best guys, they still have to go through that. So I think there's a trade-off there between the maturity. I think everything else is balanced. Everything else, their schoolwork, their personal lives and all that. But the wrestling part, that maturity, it takes another year, of just going through that. And then, yes, I think they'll make that jump and you'll see really good results from the best guys.
They add cross country and track and field to that list of having more success when they come back from mission. The young men and women up the road in Provo, they do fairly well every year in cross country and track and field. They actually I had a man and a woman
and
this
a woman
year won the individual NCAA title.
Yeah, it's the first time that they've had a woman win a title. Yeah, I was just actually reading an article on that. But yeah, BYU is getting into the Big 12. Big 12, they just got a gift, because they're like all of their teams. Their women's soccer team was just in the championship against Florida State. They lost in penalty kicks 4-3 for the championship. And basketball team, they got beat by UVU, but they were ranked 12th at the time. But we went down to the Vegas tournament. We're like getting ready to go grocery shopping, and the guys are all watching because it's coming down to the end. And, you know, it's a big deal. And our crowd, like, we have 8,000 seats in our thing. And normally, you know, they're not very full, but that thing was full, and that was a huge upset, you know, for them to do that. But yeah, it again, going back to what you were talking about, it's tough, you know, and we want them to go if that's what, you know, what they want to do. We want them to go. So, and they'll get, you know, as long as they handle that first year, they'll get where they're going to get. You know, they're not going to fall short of whatever their ceiling is.
Yeah. You know, if memory serves me, I think you were one of only two coaches, Scott Goodell being the other one, who came, you know, either from the club or high school ranks back into the college ranks. And
Steve
also,
Martin. Yeah.
Oh, Steve Martin too. Okay.
Yeah. He was doing club stuff and then went to, was it Old Dominion?
Yeah, Old Dominion.
Yeah.
Okay. But you also had a very unique situation, if memory serves me. You were there for the transitional period before you guys could actually compete in Division I, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know who the first coach was? Because it was 7 years, and the first year was they made the announcement, they get the stuff, they've hired the coach.
It was Cody,
and then
right?
Huh?
Was it Cody Sanderson?
Yeah, it was Cody Sanderson. So whenever they win a national championship, I always think Cody deserves it because he went through 3 years of just a really rough time trying to get things, you know, going at Utah Valley. So, yeah, a lot of respect for those guys.
So I guess now I have two questions for you. The first one being, what was that transition period like in terms of being a coach, going at the recruiting aspect of it? And then I guess the follow-up would be, what is your, I guess, relationship or ties or connections with the Sandersons? I know, you know, they've kind of been a big name in Utah wrestling, and, you know, you've had a lot of success at those levels as well too, and been involved with, you know, the Fargo team and stuff like that.
So the 3 years that Cody was there, none of those guys were going to get a wrestle postseason until that point. You know, a lot of the guys that I brought in, I redshirted, Ben redshirted, my club kids redshirted, so that, you know, we could just, they'll have that year, and then they'll have 2 more years, and then they'll have 2 years left. And so our first year, like, I had to even forfeit 2, even 3 weights at the end of the year to not pull any of them out, because the future was what we were trying to build. And my AD even said, I hope we never have a year like that. I hope we won't, you know, but we went 6-12 my first year, and that's junior college, NAIA. I mean, you know, we didn't beat a D1 team, and we got skunked a couple times. And that's hard to go through a year. I mean, it's hard I'm used to success as a coach. I was used to my guys progressing, doing well, wrestling well at the national level. But this was different. And the next year we were like 9-11, and it was all like D1. Like there was like, maybe we had a couple, but most it was D1. And then we were like 11-3 and 10-3 with these same guys. It was a good group of guys that all kind of came back and wrestled there, and quite a few of them were from my club. And so by the time we hit the 3rd and 4th year, things were going well, and we'd have our ups and downs depending on seniors and, you know, experience and recruiting. But when we were out recruiting, I remember going to California, you know, and I wrestled in California. That's where I grew up. And, you know, I'd go there and I'd have parents or wrestlers say, now, what division are you? Like, who are you guys? Like, they didn't know who we were. And, you know, we were UVSC at the time. And heck, 2010, I think we changed to Utah Valley University, and I couldn't get the Torellas to change it from UVSC for about 5 more years at the Cliff Keen Invitation. I'm like, it's Utah Valley University. And they go, okay, we got it. And then it'll be UVSC, you know. But I think they know who we are now. You know, within a few years, I would hear, oh, I've heard some good things about what you guys are doing, or, oh, you guys beat Boise State and they were ranked 8th. You know, we did that one of those first 4 years. And so some things, we started getting a little bit of momentum. And so, you know, that makes it a little bit funner. Having the success makes it fun, seeing your work pay off. But it always felt like it was 2 steps forward, 1 step back, you know, injuries, or, you know, you think you've got a kid and, you know, then he ends up signing somewhere else and you feel like is a good fit for them. But, it's all part of the process. And, part of how we feel about this program now is because of those rough times. And your question about Cody and the Sandersons, Steve Sanderson had 4 boys. They all wrestled, and they've all had an impact. Now they all coach. Kyler's running a club, doing an amazing job. Cole's coaching at a high school, doing an amazing job. And then, Kel, it speaks for itself, his own career and then what he's been able to do. And, the best thing that he did was hire Cody, because Cody is the mastermind. Like he is a computer when it comes to wrestling. Just, my assistant coach, Erkeen Tadzimedov, wrestled for Cody. And Erkeen idolizes him because not only was Cody as his coach, he was his parent. He was his big brother. Like he did whatever he had to do to help take care of Erkeen. And for that, I love Erkeen, and I just love the fact that, Cody brought him along, and now he's a successful coach, and, he's doing a great job. But like I said, Cody had to go through the roughest part of that. Like we didn't have a room. So my first year, we didn't have a room. We were on the balcony. Then we got a room, and it was an area that they would practice, that were a couple of classrooms that they had to work around, like cabinets and things that were in the way. They had 1 year they were on the balcony, 1 year they were at a warehouse, and then 1 year they were working. Like it's just, one of them didn't have a bathroom. Like it was just rough when they first started out. And so he went through those dark times and got it to the next step where I was able to step in. It was a little bit easier. But it's great to watch the success they've had at Penn State. You had this period of time where, Gable took over at Iowa and styles changed. And it's like, you got to be able to grind, and you've got to be able to push this pace. And if you can't do it, you're not going to be able to be successful. And, now you have this mentality where that's not how Penn State wrestles. They wrestle and they're loose and free, and they'll throw a cradle from anywhere. And, they're just like, I'll hit this throw, you get your bow nickel, you got, it's different, but they wrestle and they have fun. And that's what they'll tell you. We're just having fun. And, now I think Iowa's adjusted a little bit. They do some things that are different than how they used to, even though they're still, it's the Brands brothers. They're, Dan Gable trained, but it makes it more interesting that this style dominated, and then you come up with something different, and then again, you adapt, you adjust, and you'll see more wrestlers now from Iowa that'll be unique. It's not all the same style, but just watching Penn State, they basically their model. I really like their model. It's probably the program that I respect the most, by what they do with their wrestlers, how they bring out the best out of the wrestlers, and it's what we try to do with our guys. We're just at a lower level right now, working our way up, but we feel like we're getting closer. And we know that if the kids that come here, that they're going to be successful if they buy into what we're doing.
And talking about the styles and kind of adapting that Penn State mode of having fun and trying things and not being that Iowa style. As a coach, how do you deal with a wrestler maybe that has success, but you necessarily might not, that's not your style, or that's not how you coach? How do you kind of deal with that and meet that wrestler in the middle?
That's a great question also. Every wrestler is unique. And I had a lot of my club kids come back from a college where a coach was trying to change them. And I have mixed feelings about it, because you need to change a little bit, but I taught basics. And if I could give them the basics on their feet, what is motion? What is safe contact? What is hand pressure? How do I create this shot? How do I finish these shots? If I could teach them basics for inside tie, 2-on-1s, underhook, again, I would teach things, and then we would branch off and we would build counters and so forth. And there's no difference to that in college, but you have to be at a higher level. So if I have a guy who likes to throw, for instance, like Taylor likes to throw, he's good with underhooks. everybody knows that. He's a Greco guy, and he's hit a headlock here or there, and he's thrown this. But I'll give you an example. Taylor lost a match to Ridge Lovett when Ridge was not ranked as a freshman, and Taylor had won the tournament, the year before, but went up a weight. And Nebraska's really good at teaching a counter to an underhook. They basically get their head blocking on that side. They get heavy on that elbow, and they'll block with their hand on the hip or on the thigh. And Taylor continued to underhook in that match, and he couldn't take Ridge down because he blocked that off. And Ridge ended up getting a turn on top and ended up winning that match and upsetting Taylor. Well, Taylor wrestled a Nebraska kid in Greco to start, which I can't remember which tournament it was, but it was a year ago, and same thing happened every time he underhooked. So if I have a kid like that, now Taylor is a lot different story. There's a good side to this because I could say to Taylor, go to handwork, use your hands and don't worry about the underhook because they're shutting it down. Adjust. You're not one dimensional. But if you have a wrestler who's one dimensional and that's all they're going to be, they're not going to progress. Like when Demetrius Romero came here, I think he was a little over 500 his redshirt freshman year. So he came in. The first thing I noticed was that he didn't know how to hand fight and that he had a single to one side and he didn't use a shot to the other side. And so his high school coach I knew from college. And so he called me and he said, he lost 7 matches last year where he just didn't keep his intensity up. So I stood over him a few practices, trying to push that. And then in our inner squad, I did something I never do, which is I'm like, got his attention. I go both up in the third period when there was a minute something left and he was only up by a couple points just to get him to, just push. And then the first 2 tournaments, I did the same. So I said to him, you need to work on your shot to the other side and you need to be able to hand fight enough where you can clear into your shots. We don't want you to be a hand fighter, but even if you look at Brios and everybody says Brios is so fast from the outside, he has to know how to hand fight or he's going to have a tough time. People are going to shut him down. So Demetrius worked on those things. And if you ever watch him wrestle now, he's really, really good out of the ties, creating, clearing, making guys miss, creating those into shots. He can go to both legs. And he keeps adding every year. I mean, he's fun to watch. I have a couple kids right now who just came into our program that transferred that we're adjusting some things. But you can't come in and say, oh, you can't do this. You can't do all these things that you're already doing because it's like with nutrition. You can't say, okay, you can't have any of these things anymore and we're going to put you clear over here on this other diet. I mean, they'd go through withdrawals. So you gradually adjust. And so, we've got this one kid who did well and he's ranked. I said to him after, I said, you notice that even in the matches where you're behind and they've scouted you, you're still trying to get this shot and it's not there. And I said, so we have to go back in and create our shot to the other side. So I don't care if it's a high C is their best shot. They need a high C and a single. You've got to be able to attack both. And maybe the other side, because they want the same lead, but they, maybe it's just a knee pull going behind. Or maybe it's the setups. Case Mager is another example. He came in really well coached by Delchev out of Idaho, Supple Wrestling Club. They're, all those Idaho guys who were getting in the finals in Greco wrestled for him. Now Chris Owens is running kind of the state. Anyway, he's super good with the 2-on-1. So he's going out there in almost every match and he's 2-on-1ing everybody and he's having a ton of success. It's like, okay, so you're going to run into a couple guys that are going to be able to take your upper hand away or they're going to be able to, prevent you from scoring there. So we're going to start with this tie. And this is now going to be the thing you're going to work on the most. 25%, you're going to work your 2-on-1s and we're going to keep working better and better finishes. But 75% is going to be from this tie. And we're going to get this down. And now he's getting really good at that. And now we're working, because it's the second year, we're working with another tie. So again, it's adding. It's not really saying, don't do this. This is a wrong style. But it's like saying, I can't think off the top of my head of an example where it's just, this is just really bad. Don't ever do this, right? But I do have guys who are too high in their stance because they got away with it, because they were quick, in high school. And so I give them a ball drill where they have to get down in a stance for 5 minutes after practice, just getting used, and they'll push it and then shoot to it and then angle it and do circles. And I have little drills that I'll have them do. I'll have them do repetitions, like I said, 25 reps on something I'm trying to get added or adjusted, just a different feel. But again, you don't take away what they feel they're good at. You just adjust and adapt a little bit. And then some, they'll just stop doing the stuff that you were worried that they would start doing because this feels better. But at first, they've got to still have that. Like, I'll have a kid walk off, why did you have me do this during the match? And so I'll explain to them why. But I also tell them, when we're coaching you and you're out there, it's still your call. You're the one out there. So like, they can even look over and I could say down and they could say both up. And then we might talk about the philosophy of that after, and just say, okay, why? And here's why I would have wanted you to go down. And, they can learn from that. We can learn what's going through their mind about why they chose what they did. But we're there to support them. We're there to get them to a certain level. But a head coach has to be a therapist. They have to be, you have to get to know your kids and you have to know how they respond. And so you don't jump in and just start changing things for guys. But you get a feel for it and then you start walking through with it and then you ask for their feedback. How are you feeling with that? Again, it's a process. So.
Man, there's so many things I want to ask, right?
I love talking philosophy. It's wonderful, right?
It's
talk for days.
It's awesome. Well, we want to be respectful of your time, but I definitely have a laundry list of things that just came to my head. I guess first and foremost, hearing you talk about this philosophy and working with the athletes, it's been a long time since I've been competitive on a wrestling mat, but it just seems like, as you said, the sport is always in progress and progression. And you mentioned the Sandersons, and it just seems like, again, you said it's only our advice. You're the one that's on the mat. So you can, at the end of the day, it's your call, where I feel like, and maybe that still might be in some programs, but I feel like it's evolved so much in the coaching philosophy where like you said, there's like this therapist, but this push and pull kind of relationship where, sometimes in the past it might have been like, just do this and do it harder and then do it 10 times more kind of mentality, where there's just this whole different kind of philosophy of the sport. And another thing that keeps reoccurring in hearing you talk is, the topic of fun and having fun and making wrestling fun. And Penn State has fun. Whereas, man, I go to some of the guys on my team and they'd be like, well, that was never fun, And so I love to hear guys like Yanni and some other guys talk about wrestling being fun and the love of it. With all that being said, sticking with practice, we've had a couple coaches, Matt Azevedo and his name? Why is his name? Chris Bono was on. They both have adjusted to the morning practice time. Do you have any unique sort of practice schedules, or what's the practice look like at UVU? And have you moved from the balcony?
We have a wrestling room, and there's a building being designed that's got some money towards it. That's not going to just be wrestling. It'll be a student center, but that's where our wrestling room will be, because it's a student center now, but it's like mobile units. People come on the recruiting trip and they look at the building and they're thinking, not sure about this. And they come in our room. It's actually a really good room. So it's kind of nice. It surprises them. But what we do, like we try to avoid injuries. So like if we're having injuries, we'll look at, okay, what are we doing with our lifting? How does that lifting tie into our practice? We had a period of time where we took deadlifts out because it seemed like a lot of our guys were getting sore backs or, even back issues. But we like to have at least one morning practice a week, so they need to be used to wrestling in the morning as well as the afternoon. They have to learn their process of eating before those practices in the morning, just like the afternoon. So we mix it up. But now we actually have moved to the 2 days that we lift. We definitely practice where we practice in the morning instead of lifting and then having intense practice where then injuries can occur. We'll practice on those mornings before we lift in the afternoon. So that's an adjustment we just barely made. But we like to have the mix. And the other thing that we added last year that we changed is we used to run a lot in the fall, and then we would get some running in during the end of practice, like an extended match. And we still do the extended match, but we run 1 day a week instead of wrestle. And it's just a change of pace. It's just something different. And last year kind of showed us even more that our season's a grind. November to March is a grind, and it's a long season. And again, we talk about mental health. You're going to have guys get run down. And, I've given up dual meets. Like, we've lost dual meets because I've kept people home to rest them because they're just not all there. Everything's about postseason. So we can lose a duel. My AD understands what we're doing, and that's good. I don't have that pressure where if you don't win, you're going to lose your job. They like the job we're doing. They like what our guys are doing. Postseason's been, it gets better and better. But all those things have to be weighed. What's important to you? What's your priorities? And just like with the guys, and we talk about big picture and their decisions, I have to have that be an easy decision for me to say, I'm going to sit you because you tweaked your knee, rather than tape that up and put you out there because we have to win this duel. It's backwards. I want you for postseason, so I'm going to protect you, and we're going to put somebody else out there. And hopefully we're getting to the point where that next guy is as good as that first guy, or at least there's not a real noticeable difference. And we're getting closer. We're getting closer to that. We got several weights where we're too deep now, where those guys can be ranked. So, but yeah, what those coaches are doing, where they do some morning practice, is really good because you wrestle in the morning sometimes. I mean, biggest tournaments, Big 12 or for us and nationals, you wrestle in the morning. So you better be used to doing that and what your process is.
Yeah, I never thought of that. And sometimes you hear of like first round, early round upsets, and maybe it's just because the one individual that was favored is used to practicing at a certain time, and they weren't used to wrestling at 9 o'clock in the morning or getting off the scale. That's interesting that you mentioned that. You also mentioned the road work, and I'm an ultra marathoner, so I always love to hear that wrestlers get into their road work. What sort of elevation are you working with out there in Orem?
We're like 4,800. Like we got decent. Like, we're not quite Wyoming where they put their 7,000 as you walk into their gym. Good luck. Yeah. But try to get that in your head. But yeah, you better be in decent shape when you come out, or you're going to be breathing pretty heavy. It's elevated.
Does that do you take pride in that home field advantage a little bit?
Again, I talk to our guys because I'm trying to sell them, when you go to Wyoming, don't worry about it. You're fine. Is I tell them they're going to be fine. These teams are going to come in and they're going to be fine. But we do want to push the pace. We do want to be the aggressor, and we want to be able to get guys tired. But it has nothing to do whether it's at home or not.
Sure.
So no, I don't focus on that. And I always chuckle when I see that when we go to Wyoming. I love the fact that they do that, because I think it's like, okay, you're taking what you can and you're, milking it for everything that's worth. It's like having that, sixth man and, basketball or whatever, or the crowd being involved. Sure. Right. So yeah, it's just, again, our focus every time is I don't make big speeches right before. I'll just remind them, stick to your process, make adjustments afterwards. We'll talk to them afterwards and just say anything that you felt like was off, make sure you're writing in your journal. Let's make sure that you're continuing so that by the end of the year, your process is where you want it. And that's the focus. I want them just continually to go out there and then feel good when they're coming off, win or lose, that they performed, that they put it out there. And we're trying to get them to say, I don't care if you win or lose. I care that you're getting better every match. This is this is progress. It's not, you're not going to be the national champion today. It's going to be, at the end of the year, it's going to be next season or whatever. But the idea is that every time we walk into the practice room, every time you walk out and compete in a match against somebody else, you're trying to be the best version of yourself. So how good is your process? Is there anything missing? How did you eat? How did last night go? So it starts from the day before even, right? Or even the week, how you hydrated so that your cut was right. So again, those are the things we spend all of our energy on, so that if they can focus on the process, it'll take them off of going, oh, I'm wrestling so-and-so, he's ranked such and such. Don't worry about him. Worry about what you have control over. And we have a mentor program where I match all the wrestlers with these successful business people, doctors, business people, IT guys. They all so that they're already networking before they graduate. Every single one of those guys, I'll have about 8 speakers a year come in, and they'll talk for a half hour to these guys. It's all about our words. Like before, it was whatever they wanted to about keys to success, but now I tell them our 4 words and our next point theme. And I said anything around there. And of course, their why, all that stuff. These guys, a lot of them are like multimillionaires in business. They've started several companies, and a lot of my guys are business guys. And so they get to hear these things over and over from them as well. So just your process, putting your daily habits together. So that's who we are. And so when we talk about goals, it's really about their individual and getting those daily habits down and having a big picture in mind to make those daily decisions even easier. Clarity, consistency, trust and communication, big. So
committed to the process.
That's right.
Love it. Coach, is there any, you mentioned that, business, a lot of you guys are business majors. Is that one of the more popular programs at UVU? Is that what you guys are known for, business, or is there any other specific majors?
Yeah, actually business is good. I mean, like it's really good. And they're building a $40-something million Woodbury School of Business, which is great. But we're very well known for our financial program. It's actually one of the top in the country. Our aeronautics program is one of the top in the country, like top 3, both of those. Our engineering program, we've only been 3 to 4 years in. And they just the last 2 years won nationals in the robotics against like Duke, Ohio State, all these, they won it. Those are, our nursing program is excellent. Like there's several that are really good. It's just that a lot of my guys, even if they didn't start off going to business, get really excited about the mentors when they come out and talk and they're running their own businesses. And, I want all my guys to coach. I want them to help with clubs. I want them, to give back. That's what started my club. When I started Elite, we had BYU was the only program. It wasn't producing any coaches. The coaching in Utah was kind of flat, like older guys. And it's like, how's it going to grow? And so my whole goal was to develop wrestlers to go out, wrestle college, come back, and hopefully coach. And that's actually happened. There's a ton of coaches that are coaching that I coached in club or at UVU. And so I want to see them coach, whether they coach at high school, coach club. I want them doing it even now. Go help, do privates for some kids or help this club out, whatever, get involved and give back. And it makes them a better wrestler as well. So, but they hear these business guys, and that works out great because you can set your own hours if you're, running your own business. Well, not to get it started, that takes a lot of hours,
Yeah.
but eventually. So
cool. Thank you.
Coach, I am bought and sold. If I had any more eligibility left, I'd be applied to UTV because I love your philosophy and your approach to things. It's right on our wavelength. So thank you so much. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. We have a couple rapid fire questions for you that we ask all our guests, and we'll throw in some wrestling ones because we always do that with wrestling coaches. What do you got, Richie Rich?
Coach, is it stance in motion or stance end motion?
That's a good question. It's stance in motion. They're never standing. So it's called constant motion. You are moving, but yeah.
Right on.
Coach, what if you're a wrestling shoe guy, what's your favorite wrestling shoe of all time?
Oh, I'm
what
not
do you
a
wear
wrestling
now?
guy. I wear whatever they give me. I laugh at these guys. They get so caught up in that stuff. I just like, give me a pair of shoes. I'm fine. There have been 1 or 2 that were a little stiff that I'm like, no. But we're an Adidas school, so I'm going to tell you Adidas. So
right on. Good answer.
Taylor
Coach,
Lamont's the one you need to ask that to. He's
okay.
Yeah, way out.
He's a shoe head.
Oh yes.
Okay. Coach, is it states or state?
State.
Okay.
Is it 125 or 25s?
25s.
Right. I'm good on wrestling.
All right. So I don't know if it is different for every wrestler, but going into the second period, top, bottom, neutral, defer. What are you doing?
It depends. Like if we took a guy down and just rode him a bunch, we're going to defer because he's going to take both up and we'll get rid of one of those points possibilities, right? But a lot of times we'll just tell him to take down. But it's really, a lot of times I'll turn to them. Like we get these newer guys and I haven't watched them enough, and I'll just say, it's up to you. Right. And then we'll see what they like to do. But we'll either take down or we'll defer if it's our choice, typically. So, hey, but it's not set one way or the other.
I do have one more.
Okay.
Would you like to see wrestling become a 1-semester sport?
Yes, I would. I worry about the postseason stuff, or not postseason, but off season, kind of the timing of how all that will work. But yeah, it's better for the guys. It's like, you can tell with not my very best students, because our guys do really well in school. It's an expectation, but you can tell where the guys who struggle a little bit, where our matches started, because all of a sudden their grades start slipping a half grade or full grade because they're starting to focus too much on the wrestling, and it still needs to be balanced. And we give them all the opportunities to do that, but it's just hard. It's hard to not gravitate towards, okay, I got matches coming up. Your mind's thinking on that. So I think it's good. And it also, because we'll lose a month or so, like from when we start to when we finish, I like that. I think that what we learned from that was we wrestled too much. We wrestled too much. And so I like the idea that it'll be shorter. So those two are the main reasons.
Are there any rules you would like to see change?
Yeah, I'd like to see them call stalling and when they're top bottom, when guys push guys out, because they do it when we're on our feet. Like you're on your feet, and in that case, it's not necessarily even trying to prevent a point. It's just trying to push them out so they get called for stalling. But when you're on top and that guy stands up and you push him out of bounds, or you turn and then you pull him out of bounds, you're trying to prevent a point. To me, it's just as important as the neutral call. I think it's it's never called. You don't see these guys call unless they do it like 3 times. And I just think it's ridiculous, because we really want to see action. So why have a guy ride a guy gets to his feet and then you get to use the out of bounds and get away with it? So I'd love to see stalling called, on out of bounds from the non-neutral positions. That's one that stands out right now. But I'm sure that if you brought up several topics, I could tell you my philosophy on them, and some would be, we need to change that.
Coach, we're originally from New Jersey, so the Rutgers-Princeton match is always is a good rivalry and gets the state of New Jersey fired up. We just had the Cyhawk event on Sunday night, and Bedlam is coming up. Does UVU have a rival school that you guys tend to get a little bit more fired up for?
It used to be Boise, and then they dropped. And then I would say, Fresno would have been one, because we had wrestlers that came that went back, or guys that were there that came here, that came out of their backyard, right? That we had come. So that would be considered a rivalry, but not really. It's those programs dropping kind of took that away. So they're definitely, we want our guys getting up the same for all of them, just like I said, before. So even if it was a rivalry match, we wouldn't focus on it being that. Sure. It would just be, again, hey, let's get ourselves ready for that. But I would say, as like Oregon State's getting better. Like I loved when we were home and home with Stanford, and Coach Coles actually called me and was going to try to keep ours going, but it didn't work out. That's when it's not a rivalry. Like I loved Borelli. I thought he was a wonderful coach, and thought he developed in his that class that he had, that's now, they're sophomore. Well, they're still freshmen. Yeah. He's done a great job, and I have a lot of respect. So it's not really a rivalry. I just really liked how they wrestle. I like him as a coach and his philosophy. So I liked wrestling them. I think that Oregon State is going to be a fun one we were wrestling them in Idaho, because they're trying to just kind of promote wrestling there after they dropped. And the guy who's promoting it was one of my wrestlers' coaches. So he kind of reached out, and they're going to be a solid program. Had a lot of transfers, and they're a whole different team this year. So I think that those will be some fun matches. And of course, all of our ones in our conference that are Colorado and, Wyoming. And so, those are all important matches to us, because they're Big 12 matches, and we wrestle them every year. So Wyoming was off this year, but he contacted us, said he still wanted to do that. So we got him the same night as Missouri. So it kind of helped him out. And so that'll be a fun night as well.
So, Coach, I think that is all for our wrestling rapid fire. We got 4 regular ones. My first one is, do you have a daily practice or daily ritual that you do just to kind of start your day?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I do the basics. Like I get up and I go to the bathroom. So there you go. No, I get up really, I have an alarm clock in my head. So whatever, even if I set my phone, I get up and I have a set thing that I know that I'm doing. So like if my schedule is such where I can work out, I get up, and I'll get my workout stuff, go downstairs and I'll work out. I have a gym downstairs. So I'll work out. If it's a day where I'm not, then I have a certain routine, it's just, and I won't go into my spiritual stuff, but there's some stuff that I do spiritually, as well. But, no, I just want to make sure that I work out before practice, typically, if I can, because it just gives me more energy to really be pumped for practice. And when I don't, I feel a little more sluggish, and then I have some things that I have to do to make sure that when I step on that mat, it's just like if I'm competing or if it's practice, I've got to be ready to go and put my energy into it, just like I expect them to do.
Coach, I think I already know the answer to this question, but are you a coffee drinker?
I'm not. I never have been.
Okay.
So yeah. So that wasn't
So I thought
anything. Yeah.
Okay.
Coach, what are you listening to right now? Music-wise, podcasts, audiobooks? You reading anything?
That's a funny. So I listen to whatever auxiliary cords, that's whatever phone is plugged into practice, unless it's like swear word after swear word, in which case I'll say, no, that one's gone. Our assistant coach, has probably the best one. So, but this year it's funny because I'm not a big technology person. Like I came in an hour before to make sure that everything you guys sent me was set up on my laptop. And so I said, okay, I'm good. And I could leave that. But I drove my younger daughter, to Alabama this year. In the summer, her husband was doing sales. And so to get her truck out there, I didn't want her to drive by herself, and so I drove her out there. And because I was doing that, she said, Dad, I'm going to do a playlist for you. So all of my songs, Journey and Styx and the Beatles and everybody that I've ever listened to that I really like, I'd say, oh yeah, you need to listen to these. And she's playing those and she's recording them all. And so I have this 5-hour playlist now. That's what I'm listening to. So
excellent. Coach, before March 2020, this used to have a much more lighthearted feel to it. Now it's taken a little bit different turn, but at any given time in your travels in Utah, when you're not coaching or spending time with the family, do you ever find yourself in a YouTube wormhole late at night? Have you ever been to Skinwalker Ranch? Do you have a favorite conspiracy theory?
No, I haven't seen Bigfoot in Utah. So no, I don't.
No. Okay, cool.
Coach, thank you so much for your time. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I know Richie did too. Best of luck for the rest of the season, and thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the time.
Thanks, Coach. Have a great holiday.
Okay.
Good luck the rest of the season.
You too. Oh,
Thanks.
Thanks.